I'd like to begin today with a reflection with just one simple question. It's a question that I posed in our newsletter this week. That question is this: what do you believe? What do you believe? See, I'm convinced if we took the time to write down and share with one another what we truly believed about the God of our understanding, we'd probably be surprised, pleasantly surprised, I'd say, but surprised at the depth and the variety and the wealth that would be shared with one another. I really do believe that. If we sat down and just had honest conversation about what we really believed about God, we'd be quite surprised and quite amazed, and we probably would learn. I also am almost certain that a part of our understanding, if we were absolutely honest, would include doubt, right? Doubt about some aspect or understanding of the God of our belief. You see, I'm kind of convinced that, and more than kind of, I am convinced that Thomas has for centuries actually gotten the short end of the stick, right? Doubting Thomas is what we usually refer to this gospel, right? Doubting Thomas. It seems like whenever somebody doubts something in life, especially if it's in the church, then we make reference to this gospel, right? And we refer to doubting Thomas. Christians and non-Christians alike know that story. Everybody knows that story. As if doubt is a bad thing. As you know, I couldn't disagree more. Doubting Thomas' story, I think, is, I believe, one of the greatest lessons of authenticity taught by the gospel. So Friday evening, I had the opportunity to once again watch the movie. It's the most popular streaming movie right now. I bet you could guess what it is. Conclave, right? It's the second time I got to see it, but had the opportunity to sit and watch that movie again. And while I know some of the minutia of the movie is absolutely false, it nevertheless contains some really poignant and really profound insights and really profound theological positions, one of which I believe is this line from the homily of Lawrence, Cardinal Lawrence, at the opening of the conclave, where he says, "Certainty is the great enemy of unity." Certainty is the great enemy of unity, and certainly is the deadly enemy of tolerance. I believe that insight is actually extremely true. All we need to do is to look at our world and our current atmosphere to see the veracity of those two statements. We hear it in almost every newscast, don't we? We hear things like, remember, certainty is the great enemy. This is what we hear. They're all illegals. They're all criminals. They're all gang members. The left are crazy. The right are stupid. Right? This is the narrative we hear. He doesn't care. She doesn't care. I won't do it his way. They won't do it my way. I'll do what I want to do. It's really not too hard to see the veracity of those statements that say certainty is the great enemy of unity and certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. And there's another line from that same movie and from that same homily in which he says, "Let us pray that God will grant us a pope who doubts, and let him grant us a pope who sins and asks for forgiveness and who carries on." Unfortunately, today, I believe we've lost the art and the ability to dialogue with one another and to see in each other any semblance of goodness almost. It's if you're on the left, you're in that camp. If you're on the right, you're in that camp. And there shall we meet in the middle, right? It's like we have this huge divide. And that narrative always ends up being us and them rather than what I believe the gospel calls us to be, we, right? Us and them. I admit it can be extremely challenging to see beyond the actions and the words of other leaders, especially when we're the ones who are being wronged and offended, because the pain makes us react from our woundedness. It's extremely true. The pain makes us react. Remember on Easter Sunday, I talked about the effects of trauma on our lives, right? Trauma shuts down our ability to reason, to rationally think and to analyze, and then to speak with thoughtful reflection. Let me ask you before, have you ever been so upset that you feel like you've lost your mind? Have you ever been so right? And there's even a saying in our world, we say, you blew your top, You ever heard that? I know it's an old saying. But this is what trauma does. You want to pop up that? Trauma has a particular thing. What it does, and our bodies are amazing, right? If you want to get nervous and notice right away what it does to your body. Like right now, my hands are ice cold. Because when you're nervous, what your body does is it takes all your blood and it starts to centralize it and bring it in and pull it from every extremity that you have in order to safeguard your existence. So exact same things happens in our brain. We call it the prefrontal cortex. That's what gives us rational thinking. That prefrontal cortex, that's where we actually can say, oh, I'm angry, and rather than just going, right? So what happens when we experience those kind of things, the prefrontal cortex, in fact, that whole cortex, the whole top of the brain, actually loses its blood supply. And all the supply gets concentrated in, what's that little colored spot in the middle? I don't know what color it is. Red? Okay. And that little red spot is the amygdala. The amygdala is at the very center of the brain. It's all concentrated in, sorry, I'm colorblind. So at that spot, the amygdala takes everything in. But you know what the amygdala does? It processes trauma, and it processes it into two things, fight or flight. It's what you do. You either engage in battle or you run away. That's what the amygdala says. And the amygdala tells the rest of the brain that's the only options we got. There's no dialogue. There's nothing else. We're going to fight or we're going to fight. Run or engage. So trauma does all these amazing things to us every time we experience it. And so almost every newscast, I walk away saying, wow, I've just been traumatized. I really have, right? And all the actions of our administration, et cetera, because I feel like I'm on the wrong side of it. Now, there's other people who feel like they're on the right side. I understand that. If you're being traumatized, what happens is you lose your impulse control, you lose your emotional regulation, you lose your decision-making skills, you lose your cognitive flexibility. Like, let's play with each other, like we're 1 minute starting late or 2 minutes start. Let's give ourselves a little grace to live in the moment. We lose that ability whenever that happens, whenever that trauma does, and it stops in our entire thinking process. When trauma strikes us and rears its ugly head, there's another lesson that I believe this gospel can teach us, and that's most often overlooked, but therapists understand it extremely well. When we experience trauma, the one thing, or one of the things that can bring us out of trauma is community. The importance of community. And in the gospel, you'll notice Thomas gets back from his little errand after Jesus has appeared and gone away, and they say to Thomas, we saw Jesus, and he says, not going to believe it, right? But they didn't kick Jesus out, or they didn't kick Thomas out, right? They hung out with Thomas, and they said, really, we did, and they tried to convince him, and, they lived and ate and prayed and sang, and because remember, they're in the effect of trauma, they're locked in the upper room. If you listen to the gospel, locked in the upper room out of fear of the temple authorities. So they're in the midst of trauma. No wonder they're not thinking very good, fight or flight. They're locked in the upper room, and they don't kick Thomas out because he doesn't believe. They say, stick with us. I know he's risen. I know he's risen. I know he's here. Stick with us. And that is especially true for us. The importance of community helps us to realize that we have the ability and even probably the obligation to doubt in our faith life. Doubt is an essential part of it. It's something that we walk with hand in hand. And doubt is a part of every community. And we ought to celebrate that fact and journey with each other in that fact. In fact, I put little slips on the table so if you're going to have coffee and donuts afterwards, you get an opportunity to talk about your doubts. It's a great thing. It's not a bad thing. In fact, together, if we experience our doubt and we talk about our doubts with one another, we can come to a deeper understanding of what is fundamentally the mystery of God. Because we don't have God down. If we had God all figured out, we wouldn't need faith and we wouldn't need religion, because all you'd have to do is check A and B and C and you got it all done, right? Fundamentally, God is a mystery. And in that mystery, we live and we move and have our being, as I said in that opening prayer. Our faith is a living thing because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was no certainty, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith. So, my friends, I believe, and I'm saying that very succinctly, I believe that if Jesus was to walk in this space today, right now, and appear in our upper room, even though we're not sitting here in fear, I believe Jesus might walk in and say something like this: "Peace be with you, my friends. Thank you for doubting." So, I begin with what I end with what I began. What do you believe?